All false religions has their foundation on that principle that man believes he can figure out God. And so whatever man says about God, they begin to hold as truth without any evidence. It's just what man believes. In other words, we've come to a place in time where man is trying to create God in his image. But anything that we get about God that that this word doesn't back up, it's not God. Look, he inspired this word, and look, how do you know he did? Check the evidence. And I saw today, some of y'all probably saw this, where this Dan Brown, I believe his name is, that came out, the movie here a while back, Da Vinci Code. Now he's coming out with a book. Now he knows how to make money. He's coming out with a book that says, from what I could get by the little article, that says Constantine rewrote the Bible and made Jesus into a deity. So, that Jesus never claimed he was the Son of God.
But why?
Well, see, look at this. Look at this on the surface. Constantine came along several hundred years after Jesus. Now, this is just logic. Now, the copies of the Scripture, people had them everywhere. I mean, it wasn't like it is today, but they'd spread everywhere. He gathered all them up and rewrote them.
Wow.
Wouldn't he have had to? If he's going to make it. Say, and there were folks being killed in those days because they would not compromise. It's ridiculous. But we get to that place where look, the Antichrist is going to be man's answer to the prayer that let us do this. We can just all get together. So that's where we're at. But that's where religion is born, folks, is when man begins to decide that he can figure out God. We don't have the mental capacity to. Now, what we know is what we look at Jesus and we see God's personality. We look at his word and we see his plan. But the things that he has not revealed, our mind can't figure it out. Our mind cannot grasp a being that moves as easily in the past as he does in the future. But he does. Yes. And his word proves that he does. And, the evidence is there that he has. Because hundreds of years before an event, he inspired the prophets to tell about the event. That's right. Which shows he's been there, he knows. They weren't guessing. It happened just like he said. But what God has revealed about himself is what we know, and it's through his word and through his spirit and through the evidence. What God has not revealed about himself, our mind cannot grasp. He is all powerful, he's all love, and we see, like I say, we can see his love in Jesus, folks. We can see his plan in Jesus. But above that, we cannot sit down and explain who he is, because he's so much higher than what we are captured here in this clay body, with sin in this clay body. We want to start reading over in Isaiah 55. Let's turn over there and see what the prophet said. Isaiah 55. Isaiah, the 5th gospel. We'll start at verse 6. It says, "Seek ye the Lord while he may be found. Call upon him while he is near. Let the wicked forsake his way, and the unrighteous man his thoughts. And let them return unto the Lord, and he will have mercy upon him, and to our God, for he will abundantly pardon. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, says the Lord. For as the heaven is higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts." Do you see that? He said, I don't think like man. But man wants God to think like he does. We have the tendency to try to make God fit And I see things all the time, on Facebook. And when I'm talking to people too, that let you know, we hadn't, as a whole, we hadn't grasped a lot of things about God. About every week we see this. God has a purpose for your pain. Really? I can tell you about pain, that man's pain, it come through sin.
Yeah, that's right.
And when you see them things where whatever's happening in your life, God had a plan for it. It's almost like we don't have an enemy. And we see things. Saw one today that said, the people in your life are the ones God sent to you. Really? Some of them sure messed up. If the path of a righteous man, God orders it.
Yes.
God points the way. It does not mean that everything that happens to him is what God had planned.
No.
It doesn't mean that everybody that crosses his path is what God had planned. The devil throws folks in your path to stop you.
Yeah.
If God sends somebody by your path, it's to help you, to learn you what he wants to help, to lift you up. God is not trying to hurt you in any way. But again, when we leave off from who his word says he is, then we start making false gods. And the thing about false gods, and they're man's imaginations. But if you will look, most of them are tyrants. I mean, they'll have a little goodness thrown in there. But look at Allah. Allah demands that his followers die for him. Allah demands a bunch of stuff, from his followers. And you go back into a lot of the pagan, what we call pagan, they built, like Baal, he was this big metal conglomerate with his mouth open. They built a fire in his belly and threw the children in his mouth.
Yes.
That's what he demanded. But see, the false gods are brought forth by the enemy of man. They are. God didn't bring them forth. They're brought forth by the enemies of man. And so most of them are tyrants. Even those that looks good on the front, on the face. We look at, what is it, Hindu, that says everything's part of God, all the animals, and people will be starving with cows walking around in the house.
Yes.
The focus it's not on man, it's on everything but man. You know what God's focus is on? You. God so loved you that Jesus came to die so that you could live. But I got a nephew that he used to work with the tree planters, and I believe it was in Idaho. And he said they had some little black biting flies up there in the early spring when they're planting late winter, early spring when they're planting the trees. And he said everybody would have the hoods on and long sleeves and be slapping flies. He said this one kid, they'd just be wrapped up, just be biting them all over. He wouldn't slap one of them. Wouldn't mice the fly, because that's part of God. Sin will make you stupid. And it'll make you believe that God is not for you. Psalms, the 25th chapter, 9th verse says, the meek, talking about the Lord, the meek he will guide in judgment, and the meek will he teach his ways. In 103 verse 7, and it's a familiar scripture, it said that the Lord made his ways known to Moses and his acts to the children of Israel. They saw things and said, that's what we do. Israel saw things that was happening, and they tried to fit God in. They didn't understand, so they just said, God did that. Moses came along and tried to explain to them that there was a system of laws and sin was killing them. That's the reason he brought the commandments. See? But on down till today, so many honest-hearted people caught up believing God's doing bad things to them. God's doing bad things, but he's not, folks. We can know he's all-powerful. We can know that he's eternal. We can know that he's loved, but there are things about him that we can't figure out. Our mind doesn't have that capacity. And he's far above our emotion. A lot of folks, gets God tied up with emotion. Yeah, he can make you emotional, all right, when his power begins to move in your life. Yes, he can. But he's more than our emotion. You know what? You go to a ball game and folks get all emotional. Even to the point of fighting. It's not God. It's emotion. Yeah, see, like I said, God, thank God for it when that spirit gets to moving, that you can know that he's there. But he's more than our emotion. He is God. He is the God that he said he is. He is the God that Jesus came and said, hey, if you see me, you've seen him. See? But above what he has revealed, we cannot know. We can't figure it out. It's because we got nothing to compare him to. I mean, what can we compare God to? Everything in our life, if you want to explain something to somebody, if you got a comparison that they know about, even if you're trying to say, I saw an animal, and what did it look like? Well, it was kind of like a dog. All right, you start forming this, okay, if it's kind of like a dog, it had to look similar. Or it's kind of like a tiger, and you begin to form that image. There's nothing kind of like God. We were made in his likeness and after his image, and sin messed us up. We're the closest thing like God, and folks, we are way, way, way below who he is. Yes. Because one day we'll be like him, like we was created to be, but we can't. What do we know that we could compare him to? See, it's not there. We can't say, well, he's kind of like this. Well, can this create life out of nothing? Yeah. Can this speak and make it happen immediately? No. His thoughts is above. He's so far above. I'm looking for the day that I can see him for myself and be as he is. Romans chapter 1 verse 19 says, because that which may be known of God is manifest in them, for God has shown it unto them, that may be known of God. And what that's saying, folks, is everything that God has revealed. We can know, if he's revealed it in this book, we can know. Because the same spirit that inspired this book lives in you if you are born again, if you've accepted him. You can know that. But what this is saying, that which may be known of God is manifest, for God has showed it to him, which indicates there's things that we don't know. That's right. We don't know. David understood it when he wrote in Psalms 139, 4 through 6, he said, for there is not a word, listen to this, folks, to show how awesome he is. For there is not a word in my tongue, but lo, the Lord knows it altogether. Thou hast beset me behind and before, and laid thine hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high. I cannot attain unto it. David said, before I say something, he knows the words are coming. He said, he's been in my past. He's in my future. He said, that's just too high for me. But David he knew it was true. And we know it's true also, folks. Because he's already told our future. David said, before I even speak it, he knows it. It's just too high for me. I don't get it. I don't get it. He said, you know my words? I don't know how you do it, but I know it's so. And so many things in so many things, that's just how we have to accept God.
Yes.
Because He's revealed Himself to us through His Word and through His Son. And those things that we don't understand, we just have to say, I don't understand it, but I understand He loves me.
That's right.
I understand His plan is for me. I understand that one day, I'll know because I'll see Him for myself. Till then, my faith is just in who I know He is. And that's the way we have to go, folks. Folks talking to you about God, and you'll see this. And anytime there's a tragedy, anytime there's something that comes up, that we don't get, you'll hear folks say things like, where was God? He's right where He always was, folks. See? And they'll say things like this. Well, if I was God, I would. Well, you ain't God.
That's right.
See? But folks will start trying to say, well, if he was God, why didn't He do this? Because He's God. Because He's smarter than we are. He knows what's ahead of us. We don't. But this one thing we know for sure, that when He sent His only begotten Son to die that we could live, He had our best interest at heart, and He's never changed. Never changed. I can hold on to that. I can hold on to that. See, Jesus told us that He and the Father was one. He said that, folks. And so we can understand His love, and we can understand His power, we can understand His eternal being by looking at Jesus. We can understand what His plan is for us. And that is sufficient to get this work completely done. Until we get there, that's sufficient. But when we try to figure Him out by our own reasoning, then we start building little false gods that look like us. We do, folks. I mean, if it's not what He declared about Himself, and we start adding little stuff to it, we might not be doing it purposely, but when we start adding little stuff to it out of our own reason, that's what we're going to get mixed up, because our emotions takes over. Our human logic takes over. And let's face it, He's got a lot more experience being God than we have about being man. I saw a little thing there I thought was funny. It said, never argue with an idiot. You'll lose every time because he's got more experience. So, He's always been that. But so when folks start trying to tell you about putting God in a little box, don't argue with it. Just might as well walk on. But we know who He is in His love and in His power. We know who He is in His plan. And say when we start, and we went through that one night. It's been several years ago, right here. Had a fellow that disagreed entirely. But when we start trying to reason God's actions within our own minds, we get out of His Word because we're into our logic. And I up until today, I still hear folks say this about Jerusalem. See, when the Jews took Jerusalem back in 67, people began to say, Jerusalem will never be divided again. Well, that makes sense, logically, humanly. Jerusalem was the place that God chose to put His name there, wasn't it? Jerusalem was the place that Jesus loved. He wept over it. Jerusalem is the place where He's going to come and reign. And I've heard, leaders, and they didn't mean anything about out of their own life. They thought this. Jerusalem will never be divided again. But Zechariah said it would.
Yes.
So see what we've done? When we start saying things that out of the way we think instead of out of what God said, we start contradicting His Word. Zechariah 14 said, hey, I'll gather all nations together to battle against Jerusalem, and the city shall be taken. And it talks about the half of it would go into captivity. That's the dividing, folks. That's a dividing. Now, he does say that he'll come and fight against those nations as he fought in the day of battle when Israel was out there. But it's a dividing. So, but our logic would think, okay, Israel's back, Jerusalem's back, never going to be divided again. But she is. She is.
The house divided.
I've heard that more than once, where people say, "Well, God created evil." No, He didn't. He created Satan, which was perfect in all his ways, till evil was found in him. He put Adam and Eve in that garden, and he was fully satisfied with what he made.
Yes.
Look at it. And God saw that it was good. Everything, God saw it was good. No evil there. Evil came when a punk angel decided, like we decide sometimes, well, I got a better plan than God. But a lot of folks feel like that God created evil just to test man. And say, look at this again. If we're going to believe that God is a God that sees the future, just like He sees the past, why in the world would He drag us through all sorts of stuff that He already knows? See, look, if He already knows that you're going to stick with Him, and He does. If He already knows that, hey, you're in this thing all the way, why would He drag you through stuff to prove something that He already knows? Oh, He's trying to prove it to us. If God hadn't proved Himself to us by the cross, nothing else now is going to matter.
That's it.
See?
Just to prove.
Yeah. Yeah.
He can heal. He can heal.
See, and we look at that, and people say this every time somebody dies. Well, look, somebody will die, and somebody in their family will get saved, and you'll hear, well, you know, God took him so that one could get saved. Well, what that's saying is it took Jesus and that one to get somebody saved. No, it took Jesus. Just Jesus. It didn't take Jesus and somebody else dying. Well, if you look at that, what happened right there in that whole mix-up is the translators put the period in the wrong place. Do you understand the punctuation in here is not divinely inspired? The King James translators came along. The punctuation, and the punctuation means makes a whole lot of difference, folks.
Absolutely.
See, God come along and made somebody blind so that Jesus could come along and heal them, and God and Jesus is the same one. Come on. No, He didn't.
No.
But see, we look over there not understanding the Jehovah part of God, and we see where He said, who made the blind eyes and the deaf ears and all? Did not I? And we said, see there, God did it. No, sin did it. Sin that was sold into the system of God caused these things to happen. If you look at the creation before sin come, you'll see the heart of God. If you look at the creation in Revelation after sin is gone, you'll see the heart of God. Everything in between there, folks, is what sin brought. It's what sin brought. Now, people say this: God will accept you just like you are. No, He won't. No, He won't. If sinners come to Him, He will accept them if they come to Him. God does not accept sin. He accepts the sinner so He can get him out of the sin. See, and we got to this place now in this modern world where, hey, Everybody's going to heaven then. No matter. I heard here a while back where a preacher said you didn't even have that you didn't have to believe the creation story. You could believe in evolution. In other words, you can call God a lie. You didn't have to believe in the resurrection.
Oh.
He had a lot of things you didn't have to believe in to go to heaven. Well, I think you do. I think you got to believe God. I really think you do. Now, if you come to God, Jesus said this in John 6. He said, "He that cometh to me, I will in no wise cast out." But now the key thing on this is to understand this. He that comes to me.
Not I that brought over here.
Yeah, see? But if you go to Jesus, it's because you've suddenly realized you need a Savior. You don't go to Jesus and say, well, you know, Jesus, I'm over here for you to take me to heaven, but I ain't changing none.
Some people do.
You're wasting your time and his time, see? Because God does not accept sin. He'll accept the sinner so that he can change. Look, if God was pleased with sin, Jesus never would have died. If God would accept sin, Jesus never would have died. He never would have came. But he looked at the Pharisees. Jesus looked at the Pharisees over in Luke 16. And he said this. He said, "You are they which justify yourself before man, but God knoweth your hearts. For that which is highly esteemed among men is an abomination in the sight of God." That which is highly esteemed among men. In other words, he said, you can't get this thing figured out and say, well, okay, because I like it, God's going to like it. We just start.
That's the acceptance thing.
Well, anything now that becomes popular in the world, you start seeing folks that, and a lot of, you know, of the new, I call it New Age. You know, they'll come out of the mainstream church and just build a church to fit whatever they think.
Oh, yeah, there's
No, I'm calling God God. Yeah, they come out of the mainstream that will not accept sin. If it was ever sin, you know, a lot of the mainstream, if it was ever sin, it'll say the same thing I'm saying. If it was ever sin, it still is. And when they won't accept what the world's doing, they will come out and start another one and say, well, you're accepted here. I had a girl several years ago, and some of you may remember it. She came to Bible study several times, and then she told me one night that she wanted to talk to me about alone. And I said, okay. So we went out front, and she told me, now, I'm not practicing homosexuality, but I believe I'm a homosexual. And what do you think about it? I said, I think it's a spirit of deception. I think it's sin. The Bible declares it. And she said, well, you know, I've been thinking, you know, about that. And the next week she went to a church in Birmingham that told her it was perfectly all right. As far as I know, she's in a homosexual relationship right now. She's probably still going there. What she was looking for, she was not looking for deliverance. She was looking for somebody to agree. And she found somebody to agree. See? But God doesn't. God doesn't agree. Now, but see, this is the way it's always been. This is not a new thing. I mean, it's just got stronger in these days. I want us to look over at 1 Kings, the 20th chapter, and show man has always been man since sin came, for sure. Thinking the same way, falling out of the same tricks. Nothing new. 1 Kings, the 20th chapter. Let me show you how crazy we get. Syria, in this story, had came against Israel. Now, Syria had more people, more armies, bigger armies. They had better equipment. They were well trained. They were supposed to win. They came against Israel. Now, the king had been over in his tent getting drunk. That didn't have nothing to do with it. He went out against Israel, and Israel killed his army. Now, let me show you what they figured out about that. Verse 23. And the servants of the king of Syria said unto him, their gods are gods of the hills. Therefore they were stronger than we, but let us fight against them in the plain, and surely we will be stronger than they. And do this thing, take the king away every man out of his place, and put captains in their room, and number thee an army like the army that thou hast lost, horse for horse and chariot for chariot, and we will fight against them in the plain, and surely we shall be stronger than they. And he hearkened unto their voice, and did so. And it came to pass at the return of the year, Ben-Hadad numbered the Syrians and went up to Apec to fight against Israel. And the children of Israel were numbered, and were all present, and went against them. And the children of Israel pitched before them like two little flocks of kids, but the Syrians filled the country. And there came a man of God, speaking to the king of Israel, and said, Thus says the Lord, because the Syrians have said, The Lord is God of the hills, but he is not the God of the valleys. Therefore will I deliver all this great multitude into thy hand, and you shall know that I am the Lord. So they figured this thing out. They looked at this thing in man's logic, and they said, Hey, we got them outnumbered. We got them outgunned. We got everything. We're just going to go over there and wipe Israel out. Well, when Israel killed the army, they said, God's just the God of the mountains. That's what happened. We fought him on his own plane, and he's God of the mountains. Ain't no other way that we could have lost. His strength is just in the mountains. So let's go down in the valley, and we'll defeat him. Read the story. Lost again. Because they didn't have God figured out, folks. They didn't have him figured out. That's where the song comes from. He's the God of the mountain is the God of the valley. Mm-hmm. But in their logic, they couldn't have lost because their leaders was drunk.
Yeah.
Had to lost because God was the God of the mountain. And we get him down in the plain, and he can't do anything. But figured it out, putting God in our little box. And see, we did that for years and years and years with the story of Job. We talked about that a few weeks ago. We looked at Job, and I heard a minister say, and I've said this before, I heard a minister say one time that he wished the book of Job was not in the Bible, because the book of Job showed God in a light that he wasn't comfortable with, But no, it doesn't. We just misunderstood Job. And Job misunderstood God. See? But we tried to figure that out, and we got all bottom side upwards and right side out. God is, let me say it again, God is who he declared himself to be.
That's right.
What the Word shows, what the evidence will back up, what the Spirit will say, what God has declared himself to be. He is. And the Bible said, that he has spoken unto us in these last days by his Son. Now, if he's spoken unto us, if God spoke to us by Jesus, it doesn't make any difference what anybody else says. If it's not backing up what Jesus has already said, God ain't speaking through them. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Not the apostles, not the New Testament prophets, not the evangelists. If they are teaching different from what Jesus taught, it ain't God.
That's right.
Now, be honest-hearted and get off. Yes, we can. But God hadn't changed his mind and said, Jesus taught this, but hey, we're in modern, and I've heard folks say that. Well, we're in modern times now. What does that mean? Does that mean God's got modern on us? No, he's still the same God he always was.
That's right.
See? So, don't try to figure him out. Just look at Jesus and accept who he declared the Father to be. Psalms 100 says, Know ye, 100 verse 3, Know ye that the Lord, he is God, and it's he that's made us, and not we ourselves. It always gets me. I saw today, somebody had answered a little old post that somebody else had put on there. It told about two babies, that their mother had died, but the doctors got to the babies in time, and they survived. And this woman put on there today, the doctor saved those babies. It wasn't God. And you have to wonder. Yeah, the doctor saved those babies. But who made the doctor? Who made the baby?
There you go.
See? Yes, he's gave doctors great wisdom. They have studied life until they know how to do a lot of stuff.
Yes.
But what they've studied, God created. See? But I don't try to argue with folks like that. But I don't try to argue it out because you either accept the word or you don't. It's just that simple. But a person that can stand in this creation, breathe the air that's mixed exactly right, eat the food that the earth brings forth, drink the water the whole atmosphere is exactly right. Look at his own self in the mirror, in the complications, the complexity that makes up who we are. And can say there is no God. What else can you offer them? That again, it leaves more questions than answers.
Here first, supposedly.
They say they're supposedly. But see, all of this is man's feeble attempt to take God out of his place and to put us there. That's exactly what happened in the Garden of Eden.
That's right.
Didn't work then, won't work now.
That's what Satan's
He's
trying to
desperate.
do
He's
with
desperate.
Daniel now.
And again,
Out of place.
evolution. When you take God out of his place, everything else becomes out of its place.
That's right.
And Paul said, when they started teaching God like four-footed animals and all the creation's God, it turned loose the spirit of homosexuality. Because you get God out of his place, you got people out of theirs. You do, folks. You get God out of his place in people's mind, and people will become just like the animal kingdom. Whatever they want to do. And if you look, it's hard to see how we can get so blind. Why all of a sudden now, and why ain't people answering these questions? How did they get that blind? I know it's through sin, but it's mind-boggling. All of a sudden, everything, immoral, vulgarity, drug addiction, everything begins to just blow up.
Yeah.
Why? It's because we got further and further and further away from God. We're closer and closer and closer to the common, see? And the more that we taught against what God had said, the more Satan stepped in and said, hey, this is the right way.
Yeah.
This is the right way. So now, they can tear a little baby apart in the womb and sell the body parts, and we don't blink. How did that happen?
Yeah.
How did that happen? Somebody the other day had a thing on there, and we spent millions of dollars with these listening devices, pointed up to to space,
For aliens.
looking for aliens. And it said, they're saying if they can find rhythmic sound, something that couldn't just be happening in the natural. If they can find that there, it shows it's life in space. He said, then why doesn't a heartbeat show there's life in the womb?
Right.
Because we have got God out of his place. And now we're just trying to figure all this stuff out, and sin will not let us do anything. When we're listening to the voice of the enemy, everything that we do is going to destroy man. Because that's all he wants to do.
That's right.
That's all he wants to, is to destroy man. So this whole thing, abortion, what's that doing? Destroying man. Homosexuality, what will that do? That will destroy man. Drug addiction, what's it do? Destroy man. Teaching that there is no God, what does that do? That destroys man. If it's destroying man, the enemy brought it, not God.
Amen.
Not God. This we can know about him.
That's right.
But we're coming close to that. You know, Jesus saw this time, and he said, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on the earth? Remember him saying that? He understood where we'd be heading in this time, and we are. We have arrived. And when the church is out of here, folks, it's hard to imagine. With the influence now of the church people, and this thing has still got this bad, what will happen when none of this influence is left? Humanity won't mean a thing. You know, again, if you're in the way, they'll take you out of the way. And that mindset's happening right now. I said that a long time ago when they started just abortion by, you know, for any reason, just kill it if you don't like it. I said the old folks will be next.
Yes.
And we're running headlong in that direction.